One of the things I wanted to lead off with, we sat down, a bunch of us a couple days ago, and started talking about Web3. And one of the things that really kind of struck me, and Dan was talking about it, is his take on sort of like a description, like defining Web3. And as you'll see when you hear this, his perspective on this is really quite interesting. So I want to take a little bit of time out of everyone's panel discussions. I know you're all just mortified to really hear about this incredible way, the way of really describing Web3. And I just like if you wouldn't mind, Dan, just
Yeah,
sharing it with us.
absolutely.
All right,
Hey,
thank
everyone.
you.
So I mean, just like any new technology and technology aside, any new revolution, right? There's a lot of angles to it, and I think everyone has their angle and so forth. But I was just sharing basically my perspective and one angle on it. So the way I look at Web3 is historically in context with Web 1 and Web 2, right? So you look at, forget Web 1 just for 1 second. If you look at the previous, well, the current, let's say, uh, um, phase in this internet revolution is Web 2, right? So one graphic, I wish I could draw it and whiteboard it, but if you could imagine a machine, imagine a server, like just a machine, um, and that machine is at the center of an ecosystem. So take your favorite sort of ecosystem, say Google or say Facebook or Amazon, right? So they have a central, let's call it a database. There's not a database. There's like hundreds of thousands of databases. Just call it a central machine, a central Google machine, a central Facebook machine, a central Amazon machine. And there's millions, and in some cases billions of users, of humans around that. So imagine a machine in the middle of a circle surrounded by humans. That's Web 2, meaning machine oriented ecosystems. That's Web 2. Now, initially, when we started designing this and you talk to people in Web 2, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, fine. But what happens, and people who own that machine make decisions that are not necessarily good for the rest of the people all the time, not intentionally. And here's what happens: is sometimes we think that it's good for a small minority of people. Actually, the truth is that the decisions that are getting made at the center of the ecosystem, it's actually not good for any human. It's good for the machine, right? So if you look at, for example, algorithms and things like that, like people are left to the periphery of that ecosystem for the sake of the machine. The machine must go on. The platform must go on. So Web3 for me is, if you take that pictorial, think of a human in the middle of an ecosystem surrounded by technology. That's Web3 for me. So it's human oriented ecosystems where we are not the product that we have become in Web 2. We are the actual, not even the users. There's actually only a few industries that talk about users. One of them is the drug industry, and the other one's us, tech. Not the users, the stakeholder, the runners, the drivers. That's us in the driver's seat. So to me, Web 3, it's not so much about technology. We're going to talk about technology here, but I think technology is a means to an end. So anything that puts people in the middle of an ecosystem, to me, that's Web 3. So
Thank you. So this is a question we can start across to talk to all. We can start with Mihai. What are the technology trends that that Web3 builders need to be paying attention to, like right now, where things are going?
Yeah, I think the most important part for the Web3 technologies is to not throw away the Web2 technologies, because all the technical stuff, the programming languages, the cloud, all those things cannot be thrown away, because it's so much effort put it in there and it's so stable. The most Web3 decentralized app is not that stable, it's not that scalable, but the Web2 clouds are so scalable, running a lot of apps like Google Search or Facebook, which is Monsters app. So the I would say pay attention to all the skills from the Web2 technologies, um, and all the DevOps part, cloud part, infrastructure part, um, the scalable part, the microservices, the decoupled things, all those things which are applicable in Web 2. It's so important in Web 3, because Web 3 is just a cool version or another version of Web2 with a lot of other cool stuffs. But yeah, you have to pay attention on the Web2 technologies.
Yeah, maybe just to add a bit to what actually you were saying, and Dan also mentioned, um, and I'm going to actually say two two different things. One,
It's
to
you
complement.
got the mic.
Yeah,
Okay.
but the first thing is definitely avoiding the hype in terms of Web3 as a like overall concept. Like you can't really have good Web3 systems right now without the Web 2, 1, 2 like core. Like you cannot just dismantle everything that's out there, because it would actually be currently a pretty shitty experience. Like you wouldn't achieve something that's nice to use and useful. Uh, with that said, in all honesty, a lot of like times when concepts are thrown in tech, most lines are more blurred than people think. In the sense that like you don't have like direct Web3, you will have Web2 components because you need them, and you also need to consider you don't need to overkill things with complexity, because if the problem doesn't really need blockchain, you shouldn't use blockchain. And for things you do need, you should probably use it in a responsible way. And just to complement in the terms of trends that I think people should pay attention to, and this is a discussion I've had with a couple of people here, is I would start paying attention to the idea of having chain specific applications where you can make things efficient and interchain operability. And still you won't get rid of Web2 components. Like you will still want to interface and use them. But in terms of trends, that's something I would pay attention to.
Yeah, totally. I think here's a fun question. NFTconnect.1, the website for this conference, for a Web3 conference. Fun question for everyone to meditate on. Is it a Web 1, Web 2, or Web 3 site? Web 2? Are you sure? Why? Okay, it's AWS in terms of hosting, but if we look at, so historically speaking, we really need to get our handle on what Web 1 and Web 2 is so we can win in Web 3, right? Because history wins and we don't want it to repeat it. So we might be building a Web 3-ish machine that's very elitist in essence, and we might we might be repeating history. So I would argue it's about Web 1.5. No one can upload anything to it really. There's not much interaction. Should it be a Web 2 site? No. What's wrong with a web? What's wrong with the NFT Connect one site? It's beautiful. It's great. In other words, we should not throw away Web 1, Web 2. We need to learn where we use it. We should be okay with it, and we shouldn't just go all in on every single new technology hype just because we're literally using tanks to just go and buy groceries. Like we don't need to do that, right? So Web 1 is great for Web 1 needs. Web 1.5, Web 2 is great. Question is, what do we want to make out of Web 3? And how to use Web 1 and Web 2 technologies and new technologies to build, going back to the first thing, human-oriented ecosystems, which will have Web 1, Web 2, and even pre-Web 1 concepts, like hardcore protocols that we're all using, like switches and all that. So Web 0, for sure. There is a Web 0.
Are you just counting from zero again, like we did before?
We have to. We're all
Because you start
nerds
with this
here.
binary.
We're all nerds.
This thing,
I mean, I would not be true to my nerd community if we don't count from zero. So there's got to be there is a 1989 type of technology that's Web 0. So can't forget about that. First question of the interview. What's the first number in in the geek alphabet? It's 0.
Hey. So I think all of us are going around this idea that Web3 and Web2 are not decoupled, they are united in a sense, especially technology. And because I think I've already said that I am a Web2 developer that's going to Web3, I'm on this path. I'm going to talk about the technologies that we are using to build that microservices that are in Opus blockchain. So we use Go to write these microservices and connect them through gRPC, and then we just take these microservices and expose them to an API. Yeah, expose this API through GraphQL. We just let's put in this way so everybody understand. Let's pretend that we have some little boxes. Every microservices that I'm talking about, that's just have this data about accounts or teams or any kind of validation or transactions and everything. It's like little boxes, and they do not communicate with everything that we really see. This is the business logic behind everything. But we have to expose these things, and these things are exposed through GraphQL, and this is what I'm doing. So this is some of the technologies that we are using. I'm just naming them. But yeah, I think it's a good moment to say something about them.
Definitely.
So some of the trends I've just been seeing, it's been touched on by people to my right, is just an overall overindulgence in Web3. And as exciting and innovative as this technology is, we want to use it as much as we can. It's not always the right thing to use. You can look at like nuclear power. It's great, clean, very efficient, but you don't see a nuclear generator powering these lights right now. So realizing that Web 0, Web 1, Web 2, as they all said, are still useful, applicable, and needed in society. And then Web 3 is another application of technology that solves problems created by Web 0, Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3.
Can I add something? Well, a side comment also, I do think we should get more into nuclear power because I do think it's more efficient, although that would be controversial. And let's not get into that. I know terrible things happen, but you don't let progress. It's cleaner than a
plus one.
Yeah. That said, I think that one of the points you actually said is super important, and most applications and most things being built right now in the DeFi ecosystem and NFT ecosystem, like basically most Web3 things are completely dependent on APIs that are in servers. Like they don't actually run their own nodes. And so it's not like they're using RPCs to connect directly to the chain and consulting. Everything is still reliant on hosted services somewhere, and most use Infura, or even, for example, Metamask uses its own. It's used as a service provider to get the data from the chain. So
and they display their information on Web 1.5 websites. Just very okay.
Okay, so you're starting with 0, now you're going to 1.5.
Yeah, I mean,
you're messing with. So Dan, I had a question for you. So one of the things that you were talking about that really struck me the other day was the fact that, you know, in order to make this technology work, it's sort of like in the shop that you run, you have different kind of technologies enabled, like mobile technology and all these other techniques. Can you talk about how you're stacking those things in order to make this effective, you know, like the technology that you're building effective?
Yeah. Can I just reframe that question a little bit? Because I think you know, it is a tech panel, but again, I want to take that principle of technology being a means to an end and not the end. I think, you know, so if you look at what will it take for us to get to mass adoption? I think we talk a lot about adoption here, and there's a lot of interesting points like education and things like that. From a technology standpoint, I think there's a lot of other technologies that we need to look at, and there's fun ones, and I'll get into them. But I just want to touch on the idea of mindset, right? And particularly developers' mindset. So I look at building technical products from 3 perspectives. Well, there's a 3-part, 3 pillars to it. I would say the philosophy, the art, and the science, right? So I started, you know, I have a computer science degree, and I would have loved, I have a philosophy and art background before I got into computer science. I would have loved, you know, to learn the art of computers. So I'd love to have computer art or computer philosophy courses. I'd love to see those at universities right now or private schools. So I think the philosophy of art asks you, the philosophy of technology teaches you to ask the why questions. And then the art of computers and technology teach you to ask the what questions, like what are we building, what is useful, and what is beautiful, and what is simple, and so forth. And then by the time you get to the science and the how, you have a lot of what and why question answers. And I think a lot of us in technology, we've been taught to just think about the how and just execute the how and just come up with new protocols, but we don't ask the what are we building and who is it for and is it simple. And I think a lot of the people building this wallets and a lot of technology we're seeing today, if they would have asked the what and the why questions, we'd had more adoption. So if we think about adoption, yes, we need to look at mobile technologies and smartwatches and Arduinos and a lot of embedded technology. But if we keep looking at that from a how perspective, no one's going to use them. We need to make them beautiful, easy to use. We need to ask why questions. Why should I use this? What is it for? Someone talk, what's in it for me, right? What's in it for my family? What's in it for my community? So I think what I'd love to see is, I think this is most a lot of community building here, like people with a community mindset. We go to a lot of conferences. There's a tech mindset. If we can unite these two worlds, right, like building communities and building tech, and teaching the tech people to think from a community building standpoint and ask these questions. You guys ask a lot of the why and the what questions, and we meet in the middle. That's when I think we're going to see adoption, and we're going to have beautiful things that any grandma can use, right? So it's not. I would say it's not so much about technology, but asking the other questions, the what and the what and the why.
So as we look at the what, as we look at the why, I mean, so I just be curious from just a survey of what you're seeing out there point of view, what projects or technologies, I don't care if they're Web3 or not, who's really effectively answering the why right now? When you see the why, when you see it, you get it. I want to use it. I want to make it happen. So people can use that as an example about where they can go.
I guess that that's actually an interesting question in a way, in the sense that I think there's two different types of groups that are approaching it, right? Like I think there's a couple groups now that started with the how, and after many iterations they're going into the why, like, and they're trying to now understand their users, trying to redefine how they do interfaces, because it was very complex. They had a lot of hardships getting people, and as they try to grow, they kind of brute force their way into now, like they found a certain market, and now they're trying to build something that's nicer and most useful, and they try to get better experience for users. And I think a lot of wallets are actually doing that, and they're also understanding that they need certain facilities, they need to teach people. And there's the other side where I think there's other groups that see a necessity, and they're starting with something more, because the thing here is you don't need to start directly on blockchain technologies. You can start a prototype that's even centralized and then start iterating into on-chain systems, making things non-custodial, making and you start, and that's something that you see also in some fintechs, where they started a bit more trying to solve a problem with users and how they could apply the technology behind it, and maybe they start going more decentralized afterwards, either by necessity or they need to pivot or whatever. But I think we still need more people to just think about what they're doing since the beginning. And one of the things I do think that it's important is always starting, when you want to build something that matters, I think you should start with community and then technology. Like you should start with simple things and then push innovation into them. And you'll also notice when you're getting to a point where you're pushing maybe too much or things that they don't understand, because you'll get churned and people like stop using your stuff. But if you already start with a problem that you're solving and you focus on how they can have a easier solution or like a more something they understand, then you can push technology. And as an example to that, going back into the fintech side, a lot of people, like, you will get like maximalist with a certain, let's say, a cryptocurrency, even Bitcoin and other things. And it's not that I think they're bad, but for example, if you want adoption of crypto cash payments and other things, you probably want to understand the market. And let's say in Latin America, people value USD as a stable currency. That's why there's in most countries parallel USD marketplaces where people buy and trade cash. In Argentina, as an example, they call them arbolitos, which are people that are like in parks and other places, and they'll exchange you Argentinian pesos for USDs. There are arbolitos, which are trees because they have leaves, which are the USD. It's a funny name, but the point there is, if you want your grandmother to start getting into, and it's still hard because she needs to install an app, right? But if you want her to trust it, like maybe you start with something like USD that you understand, and don't go directly into get them Bitcoin and other things. But it's
Yeah. Maybe it'd be cool to rephrase questions sometimes. Like, for example, there's questions that we throw around a lot, and I talk about all the time too. But sometimes I catch myself. I'm like, is this the right question to ask? So should we actually work on getting grandma to install a MetaMask wallet? It's just let's talk about that. Maybe we should. Should we? I'm not convinced, man. Let me give you a little story. I just want to give you a tiny little story, right? Check this out. 1995, right? I'm in high school. I was 2 now. And I discovered the internet, right? So the internet, to geek out a little bit on the internet, it's got this like things called packets, like TCP packets, TCP/IP, UDP packets, whatever. So I first discovered that, and I read about them, and I started implementing. 1995 Java came out, so I'm like, this is the new cool language. These guys hate Java because it's not cool. Anyways, but I wrote UDP packets in Java and TCP packets in Java, and I was freaking out because I sent those packets over to a friend's computer. I'm like, oh my goodness, I did something on my computer. You got it on yours. What? This is the future. This is the future. Imagine this. Imagine me going and saying, I'm going to get a t-shirt, and I'm going to put UDP on my t-shirt, and I'm going to put TCP on my hat, and I'm going to get my grandma to get into TCP, UDP, IP, PTS, HTTPS, SSL. I think that would be the wrong thing to do. I'm not saying it's exactly like that, but it's kind of like that, because right now we're developing the protocols for Web3. Those are the protocols for Web 1. And if you go to Web 2, I built my whole career in Web 2 in mobile. You're not going to go and talk to grandma about Objective-C and how to build bridges in Swift and Kotlin and all that stuff. She doesn't care. But grandma cares when she downloads WhatsApp and talks to her grandkids. I actually tried to get my parents in the 90s to talk about internet. They're like, what? What are you talking? I'm like, watch this, Mom. I remember. I was like, you see this thing? www thing? One day, everyone's going to have a www thing. She's like, are you crazy? Point is, my dad's on eBay now, flipping cars, the model cars and things like that. When they see the actual usage and value, and what I'd love, to me, what I think is going to happen in terms of adoption, I believe, if we look historically at Web 0, Web 1, and Web 2, when we talk about the value of things that we can build with Web 3 without using words like, I love the panel on utility with like every time you say utility, you like take a shot. Every time we say Web 3, maybe Web 3 is different, but forget Web 3, but crypto, USDT, Tether, stablecoins, Metamask, wallets. Don't talk about that. Why don't we talk about building great user experiences for grandma to talk to her grandkids, making people enjoy their time at a restaurant with their friends, and building social payment apps or whatever. Things that we care about. And then, oh, by the way, if you want to do that, you just got to get this thing that, it's called a token, whatever. You just got to insert it. One analogy, and I'll leave it at that I have is, take my kids to an arcade. You see all these beautiful games you can play and machines. Imagine telling your kids, look, let me educate you on the tokens. So we're gonna go to this guy. I'm gonna take my cash, my dollars or whatever. I'm gonna give it to him. He's kind of like an exchange, and I'm gonna give him that fiat, and he's gonna give me a bunch of tokens. But you see, these like yellow tokens, they go for the basketball machines. You see the red ones, they go here, and I'm gonna work very hard to educate my kids on tokens. Why? Instead, I should say, what games do you guys want to play? You want to play that? Oh, Dad, I'm into basketball. No worries, let's play. Oh, by the way, we got to get the yellow tokens. All right, cool. So that's a means to an end. And I think to me, I think one of the things that I think I love to see is things like Coinbase. I love and hate Coinbase. It's back to your question. Do you know how much in Web2 technologies in Coinbase? Like when you look at that NFT that you have in your or even OpenSea, when OpenSea and Coinbase projects like that, they're not Web3 technologies. They live on their servers. But if they didn't, you would not be able to see that image. You would take you like maybe 3 minutes to sync to the next IPFS server and whatever. So the point is they made it useful, they made it simple, they made it fun. And I think in all the projects you have here, a lot of great projects. If we can make it useful to people to use them and don't worry about the Web3, they're gonna ask us and knock on our doors to get educated on Web3. The greatest way to sell is when people ask you to sell to them, right? And now we're just shoving down their throats, like, you gotta get right? So, and they're gonna tell us, they're gonna say, by the way, why do I have to press 3 times on? Why is it 3 clicks? Can it be 1 click? Oh, good thing, I never thought about that. So they'll actually teach us how to make them easier. So just that's, to me, stuff like OpenSea and Coinbase and things like that, actually examples that you love and hate that make it easy and useful. And that's where the heart of adoption. All right.
So when you're getting maybe this comes from like where you are. We were talking the other day about being in Romania and development in Romania, in that environment, you know, where you are, that part of the world. Could you tell us a little bit about, a lot of people don't know about the innovation and all the companies and all the organizations that are happening over there. Here in the United States, sometimes we're sort of like geographically, the world does revolve, nonetheless. But you know, when we look at that, I mean, so what are some of the innovations that are happening because of that part of the world? I mean, Madalena, you know, you're in this part of the world. What's the cool part about being in this environment where everyone's just building and learning, and what makes it special?
So now that I'm thinking about that, I think my ancestors lived under this dictators that limited their freedom. They missed so much the democracy, and this thing limited their ideas. They wanted, but they couldn't. So I think that sparked in them the creativity. That's so much creativity in my country. They want to do things. And the other thing that I have in my mind right now is the fact that I see so many smart people. They are everywhere, in college, in the town, not only IT people. Every type of people. We have like 1,000 IT companies in my town. This is amazing. We have like 100,000 students a year. Great universities. That's really amazing. So what I'm trying to say is that I've seen the fact that the people in Romania want to do things, and they miss the fact that they don't trust governance. They don't trust banks. They don't trust politics. This is a real problem. They are more prone to think about decentralization than other countries. So I think Cluj can be, my city can be a really Web3 hub, and we can have an NFT Connect in Cluj one day. Yeah, yeah, because there are really, really great people.
Thank you so much. So, do you want to add anything to that, Mihai?
Yeah, I think the smartest people are everywhere in the world, but especially in Cluj, I've met a lot of people that are so hungry to learn the new technologies, the new opportunities. Yeah, they are willing to learn something new, and especially in the Web3 technologies is that topic is very hot and everyone wants to learn the tokens, the how to get rich, and yeah, but there are so many people which are so technical and they want to uh, to uh, uh, move into the Web3 from the Web2, and I think the Cluj is great. Yeah.
I just add a couple of things. Just first thing, so Mihai and I are actually talking about this. English is my third language, actually. And, Mihai was actually commenting, it's like, it's so hard to sound smart in your non-native language. So I just want to honestly just really like give up. Yeah, like for Mada and Mihai, I think these are our backend developers, and usually backend developers are about like 5 levels away from like the actual communities. Like you got like the marketing, the PR, the sales, the design, the product managers, then the backend front end developers, then the backend. And I wanted them to be here, and I, I'm just happy that they're here and they can share. And one. Yeah, exactly. One other thing I just want to share, but I think it applies not just to Romania. I mean, we're Romanian, but I think I was talking to Jorge as well about like South America, not let's say developing countries in the world. I think in places now I live in Switzerland. I have my life in Toronto, Canada, so I kind of like live in a lot of places, and I kind of let's say see different cultures. I think first world countries like Canada, Switzerland, United States. There's a way you look at life, or we look at life, let's say, in when you live good lives, when you have like running water, there's injustices everywhere. I just want to touch on that in all kinds of ways, and I've lived in horrible conditions in my life and my childhood. But point is, there's hungry people in developing countries right now. We talk to people from Nigeria, South America. I've met so many people in the last years in blockchain who they have a decentralized mindset, right? And here's the thing. In countries where life is pretty good, like Switzerland, for example, where I live right now, people trust the banks more. It's like, I'm going to put my money in the bank. It's going to be in the bank. Places like Romania, it's like, I don't know if it's going to be in the bank. So there's this other people, like, let me give you an example. There's a company out of the UK called Revolut. You've heard of it. They're like a DeFi. They're a bank. I got on Revolut right at the beginning. As soon as Romania is one of the biggest countries on Revolut. Almost everyone uses Revolut. So the local banks are freaking out because everyone's using Revolut. You just get your salary in your local bank and you transfer everything to your Revolut. So there's this hunger to adopt decentralized technology. So like one of the things I'm predicting, we're going to see the next Web3 Facebooks and Amazons and YouTubes from countries that are not necessarily the countries that produce the Web2 technologies. And I actually am excited about that because I think they're going to put their own cultural spin on them and things that maybe just different way of looking at life that are going to be exciting for us to experience. So I think that's one of the reasons I think places like potentially Romania, but other countries could be really strong Web3 hubs that we should tap into and figure out how we connect and leverage and build communities and build products through those hubs.
And just to maybe add to it, because I totally agree. Like there is a difference when you have a stable system that works, and a lot of them never had it or don't trust it. And I think that what we'll see is a lot of those places have a leap directly into new technologies. Like they're going to transition away out of a complete phase. They're just going to go into it. And the other thing is they are it's not that they're less risk adverse. They are already in risk, so they are willing to take more risks and transition into something new. And necessity always creates change, right? And the other thing, it's not necessarily Web3, but one of the things I think it's super important is technology and overall the internet, the ability for people to get information and learn by themselves and to be able to communicate is probably one of the most game-changing things that has ever happened in human history. Like, I think that what we'll see is a great creator of equal opportunity throughout the world, where people will be able to learn, work, and you'll be able to get the best ideas from everywhere. Because so far, most of the exposure of people who create, they didn't have the ability to show what they could do. And what we've seen so far is just a minority of great people creating great stuff. Now we're trying to create access for everyone, and we'll get the great ideas from everywhere. And one of the other things is that people will be able to make a living. No, they'll have the information, and now you'll be able to pay them. You'll be able to get freelancers. You'll be able to spread that financial system throughout the world, and people will be able to subsist on it. So I think that what we'll see is a huge transition where we just get the best out of everyone, but we also give that opportunity everywhere. And that's never happened before. And it's a compound of everything that's happened so far.
Yeah. Sorry, just one quick thing, please. I just got to add this thing based on what you just said. Here's one idea of how we can get mass adoption in places like the United States. Just a fun idea just come to me. Go to like an impoverished US, not a city necessarily, but like a neighborhood, and just give them Web3 jobs, right? So just give them the opportunity to just build stuff. And people who live in different conditions of life, let's put it that way, they're more creative, they're more resilient. They're just gonna make it happen. They're gonna make it happen. That's how I grew up. We're gonna make it happen. You tell us we're gonna build a smart contract. I'll figure out what a smart contract is. We'll make it happen. So I think when you do that, they're gonna go and evangelize the entire neighborhood. We don't need to get to everyone. We just gotta get to 5 people in that neighborhood. And I think that's what excites me about what he said. I think there's a lot more of those kind of people in the world. There's a lot more people that are impoverished. There's like 99% more. Get to them, get them some opportunities through Web3. Get them to build like a feature of Be Social or whatever, or give them your Be and sponsor them so they can do something. Oh my goodness, they're gonna be build tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of people, of millions of people to this space. So I think that's one way we can also do some good and help people in our neighborhoods. We don't need to go to like other countries. Like every country has their poverty.
Well, I think that's where. So, I mean, if we take away and look at this, well, the one thing that I want to do, and as we looked at it, all these terms that people have been using, anything that's complex, you just write it down in your notebooks. We go back. We're here for you to learn. I don't want you to gloss over any of the terms that were used here, because we're here to make sure that you get all those terms, that you can get better at this. But what we learned is, like, this Web3, we shouldn't just stick with a trend. We should understand how the technology is being built. We need to understand the people. We need to understand where the innovation's coming from. I mean, those are the things that are really mattering. So make sure that, as it's just my aside to the audience, it's like watching a great show, but at the end, if I ask you some questions about it, like, I'm not sure about that word. So I want you to make sure you write those down. Ask anybody. You can ask during our Q&A. But so a lot of conversations about what's going on and sort of like the enterprise and sort of the protocol. So one of the questions that I was talking to Joe earlier about is, like, you were telling me, as you go talk to people looking at getting into Web3 and looking at what they can do before they can do any innovation. I mean, what's the thing that we were talking about? What are the things that people are really missing? you know, what are they really missing? It's really helping them not get to where they need to be.
Well, the beauty of Web3 is it's decentralized. Anybody can do it. You don't have to be an established institution to create something new. So you really don't have to have anything to go out there and innovate. Does that mean that what you're innovating on is going to be new and helpful and valuable? Because realistically, innovation is just doing something differently. Solving a problem in a new, different way. So what a lot of people are doing is they're going out there and they know how to do something. They know how to build a smart contract. They know how to release an NFT, and they do it. And what they're not thinking about is the why. What is this going to give to my community? What problem is this going to answer? What solution am I providing? And sometimes they even do have that. They have this is solving this problem, but is this solving this problem better than what's already existing? There's a lot of places where people will just innovate to innovate because they saw Web 2 go by. They saw Facebook, they saw Twitter, they saw Google, and they want a piece of that. And they say, oh, Web 3 is happening now. I can get in early. So they go out and they make something, but they don't make anything with value. So before you go out and do something and create something, thinking about the why, what am I contributing? What am I adding? What value am I creating is very important. Not only just to be successful, but to cultivate value and continuously grow the Web3 space just by continuously striving to add value and lifting up the people around you with you.
So just as we're looking around, like, are there any questions? Does anybody have any questions that they're looking at right here? Ben?
Yeah. So, okay, that's interesting. So I think, especially after this whole COVID mess, remote work is the new standard. Nobody wants to go back to work in the 9 to 5 office anyway. So I think, especially in the tech industry, that kind of happens. There's people from all over the world. They speak different languages. So I'm not exactly sure what the big why behind your question is. Maybe you want to rephrase it a little bit, but if not, like, I just want to say, touch on exactly what you're after. Yeah. 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 Okay. Good. Okay. Got it. So, yep. So here's one thing. I worked with Indians a lot. Okay. And I remember going to India and very different culture. If you've never been to India, from like to the United States, even from Romania, right? Even and then, for example, I worked with Romanians and Indians in the tech space, right? Kind of like soul countries in the outsourcing industries, right? And then they don't necessarily like each other, right? So actually, part of a lot of efforts in my career was like bringing people together, right? And I'm like, let me bring you to Romania, show you some Romanian foods, and I bring you over to India and show you. And then you find out, funny enough, then you hear stories like these. I think I have more in common with you than my Indian friends here locally because you speak my IT language. And in Romania said the same thing. And that was just one example. But, you know, in Canada, I grew up in a melting pot. Like, most of my friends were from all over the world. And you see that you can actually build. It's funny because we talk about our differences a lot, but we have a lot more in common. And, you know, we all want happy families. Aristotle, very old man, said it a long time ago. We all want a good life. Who doesn't want a good life, right? So I think when we tap into those things in our companies, and one of the things we talk about our company is the idea of meaningful work, and we have a whole philosophy behind it. But how do we find work where you feel that this is your baby? We're working on our baby together. So if it's your baby, I don't care where you come from, and we all speak English anyways, because you guys enculturate it, American English, not British English, into the world, which is actually a good thing. So I think English is a great, easy language to pick up for everyone. Thank God it's not German, because I'm struggling with it right now. That would have been insane. So I think you speak English, you have the same culture, you visit the same sites, you kind of have the same desires. And then the culture differences, actually, if we tap into the things that we have in common, I actually think the culture differences are beautiful spices of life that we bring to the table. and you see how people approach it from different perspectives. I find it fascinating to see how people approach user experience design from this different perspectives, and what they think beauty is and simplicity is and friendliness is and things like that. So I think just we got to tap into what we have in common, but without suppressing our differences, but bring those to the table and let us like make it a nice bouquet of experiences. I think that would be the ideal way.
You have a yes, right there.
Funny you should say that, because someone like you guys just said in real life, and just like 5 minutes before metaverse. And I was just laughing. I'm like, this is one of those paradoxes in Web3. In real life, man, I'm a Gen X with a boomer soul. So I love in real life events. I love music and I love good food and I love conversations and like hugging and all that. And who doesn't like that? And one of the things I'm afraid of, and by the way, we should have a conference or at least a panel one day on the dangers of Web3 and blockchain. There's a lot. I have a whole list, right? So one of the dangers I think is that we're gonna miss hugging each other in the metaverse. And yeah, we're gonna have the haptic vest and everything. I actually know a friend who's working on a haptic vest. I don't want to get hugged with a haptic vest. I mean, maybe if my dad is in some sort of remote place and I can't see him, I'll take it. It's better than nothing. But I think in real life, and we actually did that. We have a guy in Dubai. We have someone in London. We have different people throughout different cities. I have a few people in Switzerland. And a few months ago, I was in Romania and we had a get together and we eat and we talk. And we're gonna try to do a lot of those. And I think at least few times a year for sure. And even the most successful remote companies, billion-dollar companies that have hundreds and or thousands of people, they meet at least once or twice a year. Like all-inclusive vacations for your family. Let's go 2 weeks somewhere or do something. Maybe that's enough. Just I know your face. We know we're good friends, and then we go back behind computer and we go use our usernames and our avatars. But I know who you are. We dox each other. So I think that's super valuable.
And I think as a meta example is, if you're enjoying the conference here, that actually also answers why you should do in-person events. If you're not I'll just hear the stream or see the stream on YouTube, and you're here, it kind of talks to why you would do in-person events.
One corollary to that is that they should not be in the same location every single quarter or every. You gotta like get some tequila in one day. You gotta get some some of our drinks. I want to hear your food and your music. I want to taste your food and hear your music. I think that's how we get it multicultural and global.
Let it out, because she's gonna give it to me if I don't give it.
Oh, I agree with that, and I think companies are gonna absolutely take people up and employees up on that offer when on that demand. If that demand rises, if you have like 10% of the employees say we need this, oh, they're gonna do it for sure.
All right.
I'd say 1997, 96.
Oh, okay.
You're thinking I'm too far ahead?
Yeah, I'm thinking 91.
No, I wouldn't go to Mosaic.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit closer, but
Okay. Cool.
I do think that things are evolved now slightly faster. So
someone actually asked me that yesterday, and a lot of people, when you're a computer scientist, people ask you to fix their computer all the time. You get that? And I don't know if programmers get that. And I always say I'm not a hardware guy. I'm a software. I can't fix your computer. But the thing is, people ask me all the time, what do you think? And I came up with this answer I'm going to use all the time. If world events remain exactly the same as now, maybe 8 years. But what I think is going to happen, just like COVID, I think there's interesting things that are going to happen in the world that are going. You talked about something interesting. Distances being compressed, the world being smaller. I believe time is getting compressed as well based on, look at COVID. People before COVID, they were not comfortable with certain things. Like metaverse, I don't know. I think metaverse would have been a 10-year discussion. With COVID, 2-year discussion. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think if in the next year or two, there's a potential recession happening, let's say, or a lot of people are going to lose jobs or whatever, are we going to talk about reskilling people as Web3 developers? Absolutely. Are people going to say, I'm not really comfortable holding my money in the bank because like I'm losing like 10% every month. Can you keep them in some other, like maybe stable coin or something? You know what I mean? So I think as things happen in terms of fiat and things like that, and people are more and more uncomfortable, and I actually have friends, I know, but I have 75-year-old friends. They said, I have money and I'm afraid. I don't know what to do. And I can't just tell them do this or do that. But the fact that they're saying that, I think there's something happening. There's something brewing. So I'm going to say that if things stay the same, which I think they won't, maybe 8 years. But if they don't, my guess is potentially even like a 3 to 5 year thing before something big in terms of adoption is going to happen, and people are going to knock on our doors and please, I don't care how many steps it takes. I want in.
But
compressing time.
The other thing is, I also think what I see is you also have like a new generation of people who are more adept or prone to digital and are more accustomed. So that it accelerates. And this is what we also discussed, the part of I personally don't want to go to a bank and do anything there. Like last time, my debit card, which Santisi will kill me if he knows that. So last time my card expired, but the thing was I lost access to my internet banking, and I called them because I had to call them, and they told me you need to come in person and get the other card, and then you can activate your web portal. And that what I did was I just told them to go F themselves, and I opened an account in Nubank. In 15 minutes, I got a digital card, I got a pre-approved credit, and then my physical card got there. But for example, Nubank and other groups are growing fast because people don't want to go to a bank. Like it's the last resort. And you'll start seeing that more and more, and that will lead to adoption. If we get to a place where people don't need to do like 100 things and it's super technical.
All right. I just want to, we went a little bit over, but you know, who's gonna tell on me, right? So, but thank you so much for this panel. I think, and a round of applause. This is doing great. It's been awesome. Everyone did really well. So with that.
That's very awesome. One more round of applause. This is beautiful stuff. Thank you, Vince.